outside.
Oh, it doesn't come in through your mic at all, so that's good.
That's good. That's good. Hey, Perm.
Okay, awesome. We're live.
Great.
I'm just gonna go on mute for now, Han, while I'm moderating who comes in.
Sure. Remind me, how many did we have confirmed?
A little over 30.
Okay.
Yeah. Good morning, Chuck. Unless it's not the morning for you. That's the morning for us, so good morning.
Okay, we're just going to wait a little bit longer here.
Yeah, I think that some people will need some time to trickle in, especially the West Coasters.
Probably.
Oh, I actually just realized, I don't know what happened, but I think we got a wave of registrants yesterday because we're up to 46 now, it says. So I'm not sure when that happened because when I looked before I ended the day, it was like mid-30s. So, well,
sure.
That's good.
Hey, Eric, how are you? Rob's here as well.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Don't be shy to drop a message in the chat. You know, make it a little more fun.
Yep. Let's just wait 3 more minutes or so, and then we'll get started with the presentation. Guys, just so you know, you can also raise your hand to speak. You know, there's a little hand wave there if you want to talk. And we've got the chat button, obviously, which we leave open to everybody, just to post questions here. Michael is going to do kind of a little bit of a filtering, but we're going to try to answer all of your questions, most of them. We're here in Vancouver, Canada, right now.
And just a quick note, Han, we do have somebody raising their hand to speak. Chuck, how do you want to go about that when it comes to someone wanting to speak?
If Chuck wants to say hello to everybody, then he can do
Chuck,
that.
you took your hand away. Put it back. Come say hi.
Look, we've got now, I see we got about 16 people here now live. So I see, you know, some of the team, but I see Eduardo, Chuck, see Perm, Jesus, AI Planet, Mel, Sean, Joe, Leon. Hi, Leon. Simon, Eric, Corey. So I would say we don't, you know, wait too much longer and get started, shall we? Here's the idea. We're gonna just go through 12 or so slides very quickly. Okay, this is not a pitch. This is just sharing with you guys what we have in mind for the next steps for OtoCo. And then what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be taking questions essentially. If necessary, Michael can also do a quick demo of the product, but I kind of assume that all of you have tried this, may have an OnChain LLC or a DAO already. So if that's okay with everybody, you know, we'll get started. I see that. Okay, I'm not sure how we're gonna get that email out of here, out of the chat. Yeah, I see you registered with that email address, but it's a Proton mail anyhow. So good stuff, guys. Let's get started. I assume that all of you can see the slides that we uploaded. And so I'm going to be very brief here. I mean, OtoCo has really gone from what was initially a product where we thought, okay, let's do this thing where we can actually put real world legal entities on chain. And it started kind of almost like a bit of a hobby of mine where we got a little bit frustrated with the frictions that some of you as clients from Autonomous may have experienced in setting up entities in all of the jurisdictions that we cover with Autonomous, and it's always quite an analog process. And we thought, surely you can kind of do this better and insert smart contracts. And so we did legally engineer and then also write the smart contracts, code the smart contracts to make this possible kind of a year and a half back. So we were probably the first ones. I'm not sure that was a good thing. And since we kind of saw that, wow, there seems to be a demand for people to quickly spin up a legal entity, and we see people do all sort of stuff with that. And then we kind of thought, hey, we should build this out from a single product, which is that LLC, into more of a platform where people then, once they have that motherboard of an entity, and that could even be just a DAO, we want to make sure that they can start purchasing add-ons, and these add-ons will not be developed necessarily by OtoCo and the team, but could also be developed by third-party developers. And that's how we then started to think that maybe we need a token to kind of drive the token economics of OtoCo. So think about OtoCo as going in its next iteration from product to platform and really becoming sort of a tooling for Web3 organizations. Okay, and so we kind of feel encouraged by Ryan. I'm sure you guys all read his thesis. They're really worth reading, even though every year they get longer. But he announced that 22 may well be the year of DAO tooling. Let's see, but I think there's definitely a tremendous demand out there from the community to kind of tinker differently, right? Tinker about how are we now going to have a new type of entity for a new economy, and is that DAO? And if it is a DAO, what can we do with a DAO? What do we need to do with a DAO? What tools do we need to add? Okay, now this is obviously a very big number, but the way we look at this is that, you know, we're just seeing this massive shift of real world assets that are becoming tokenized. Everything eventually, I think we all believe that is going to be held in a tokenized format. And I think that's going to go from, you know, fun stuff like NFTs and musics and streaming rights, and obviously, you know, art and digital art and even physical art that's going to be tagged with NFTs, to it may be your university degree further down the line, your driver's license, your property title, etc. But what we don't have is we don't really have yet a kind of a, think about it as the container, you know, the container that's going to move all that value, because I do believe that actually the real world container, that standardized metal box, has probably been one of the biggest inventions in humanity, because it kind of allowed for standardized trade. When you put the same unit on the ship and the ship brings it to the port and the port has the infrastructure to offload it, we don't have that equivalent yet in the digital space, you know, and the community feels it. You know, we're all very hyped up about a DAO and the idea of multi-sigs and the community governing a project, but very soon, and we see it every day on the autonomous side, very soon we discover that actually it's very difficult to go beyond community governance in a DAO. You know, it's difficult to have an employee, for instance, if somebody needs to be paid in a traditional way, because not everybody can be paid by just receiving crypto under some sort of services contract. And the same goes for bank accounts and fiat banking and so many other things that we want to do with the DAOs and with that community governed, you know, structure. So they are kind of a little bit cut off from the real world. And only once blockchain itself would become or would be recognized as a jurisdiction, a digital jurisdiction, could we probably see genuine limited liability vehicles on blockchain. But we're not there yet, and I wouldn't hold my breath. So what are we really trying to achieve here with OtoCo? And that's the fun we're having. We just feel the challenge is, could we not get to a point where companies are actually code? They're coded up, the shareholders are basically wallets, voting is on-chain, operating agreements are essentially smart contract. There's so much that you can smart contractify, where some of the enforcement that we currently see in the real world is happening post factum, when something bad has already happened, we basically would be able to see that enforced through the logic of the smart contract. And I think the real challenge here is to build that bridge between some of the real world processes that have crystallized. And by the way, they have crystallized away from any state, away from any laws. They have basically been contractually built over time and solidified through case law. So we shouldn't throw all that away. We should try to take what's good and build that bridge with, you know, the Web3 companies. And that's essentially what we're doing, you know, with OtoCo. We've got this live already. You can form your entity on chain. You can issue mirror tokens, as we call it, basically tokens that represent a membership in an LLC and that mirror who is an owner of the LLC. You can also give it different contents to your token. And then you will, and that's our roadmap, you will be able to purchase add-ons from what we call a dApp store. And that dApp store will have some solutions that we are excited to build internally with our development team here. But let's have the market meet the demand out there and see what third-party developers will develop and allow you to plug in as a user of OtoCo. So as I was saying earlier, right, it's really about that bridge. I mean, we see tremendous innovation happening, all of us, in the Web3 space. We sometimes feel, maybe that's because I'm a little bit older than the average entrepreneur in Web3, but we sometimes feel that people are tinkering with the Mars lander and seeing if it should have 4 wheels or 6 wheels or 8 wheels, but nobody seems to be thinking about, hey, how are we going to get to Mars in the first place? And so we want to make sure that that bridge is there so we can really entrepreneur, you know, from anywhere with legal validity and legal benefits. The team, I should talk a little bit about the team. The team's grown a little bit. You know, we've got Michael, who joined, about 6 weeks ago as sort of product for OtoCo, specifically dedicated. He's here right next to me. And we've got the development team that is majorly in Brazil, with Felipe as our main Solidity developer, Gabriel from Doim, south of Rio. I think currently this week they are in Rio, actually, for Ed Rio. Dan, who's been helping on the commercial side, the growth side, and James as our front-end developer. David is our man who makes everything look beautiful. A couple more slides. I think we got slightly higher traction now since we put this slide together, but we were obviously encouraged by 400 plus people actually, you know, feeling comfortable to use this very new technology to set up an entity and use it for all sort of things. We've seen people do an LLC, yes, to do a soft issuance, for instance. It can perfectly be used to do a soft issuance. We've seen people just wrapping a smart contract in an OnChain LLC. We've obviously seen some people dropping some NFTs out of an OnChain LLC. The key is that people feel that they have an immediate protection from having a limited liability wrapper around their effort. Okay, let's talk about the funding. We're not going to pitch you hard on the funding. We're just kind of sort of silently proud of all of you, basically, that we got to a point where, without any VC involvement, without even pitching VCs, without doing any side deals, any discounts, any, you know, non-transparent SAFs where the pricing can be different from SAF to SAF, we basically had over 130 people saying, look, I feel comfortable enough to stake this project because I feel that these guys will stick to it. And I can tell you, hand on my heart, we will stick to it. You know, we kind of feel that we are put on earth to pull this off. So we're currently at about 1,050,000, which means that under the smart contract, because we're totally at the mercy of the smart contract we built for this launch pool, we can claim the funds that have been staked come Friday this week, and we can really start funding our roadmap and continue to develop in return for sending the tokens to everybody who's pre-ordered the token. So you do want to stake before 8 a.m. Pacific time on Friday if you want to get your hands on the token. So you reserve the token, you get the amount of tokens corresponding to the amount you stake. The price is gently, and I emphasize this, gently ticking up. We're not doing any pump and dump here. We want to run this with a high level of integrity. It started at $50 and it's now, I believe this morning was at $64. In this slide, we were still at $478,000, and that's about 2 weeks ago now. Now, what will that token do? What I'd like to emphasize here is that we've seen, and we are seeing, a lot of token distribution models, a lot of token economic models from our clients on the autonomous side. So I think we benefit from that. And we kind of thought we could engineer the token such, design it such, that it kind of rolls three things in one. It will obviously be a voting card. You know, that's a given. It is a token that will allow anybody who holds it to participate in the governance of the project, which, by the way, I feel we are radically decentralizing a lot more than some of the other projects that we see out there. And I'm happy to talk about it a bit more and take some questions. But it will also be a reward token for the user. So anybody who spends in OtoCo will be receiving kind of loyalty points similar to like an airline, you know, air miles scheme. And it will also be a way for the developers to earn OtoCo tokens as they start what I call stocking the shelves of the dApp store. And so with that in mind, we actually very much limited the initial mint of tokens. We limited this to 8 million only. And the further issuance will be purely under the algorithm where for every spend in the OtoCo platform, there will be a minting happening as a percentage of the revenue that comes in. And then that revenue will be split. It will essentially be split 4 ways. It will be split between, yes, the person who spends, so the user. It will be spent, 25% will be going to the developer whose product was purchased. There will be 25% flowing back to the token holders, so anybody who holds tokens. And there will be a remaining 25% that flows back into the foundation, the OtoCo Foundation, which will then have the decentralized governance around rewards and grants out of the foundation. And so I think we kept it quite simple, very transparent, and going forward, that's very much the way we want to see the foundation work. Final couple of slides. We are looking to do 3 things this year with that 1 million that we raised. We're going to add some functionality. We're right now adding a way, for instance, for people to attest that a wallet that they have used or that they are using can actually be pledged to their LLC, so it becomes part of the LLC, and creating that legal nexus that makes it very clear that the wallet is actually belonging to a legal entity. We are going to work towards attestation of identity for those who want to attest to their real world identity, because this is going to open the way to actually add a bank account for an OnChain LLC. I really think that would be a game changer. So many people out there would love to have a fiat bank account for their OnChain LLC. And we're working already with some of the neobanks in Wyoming and some other sort of startup banks in the United States to make that possible. And then we are going to gradually add more what I call smart contract that kind of reflects the business logic in organizations. On the product side, number 2, for the 3rd quarter, we are looking to add other jurisdictions. We feel that it's possible to smart contractify a Swiss association. Remember that if you want to spin up an entity on chain, you cannot have a filing event at some sort of registry that would require you to stop the process in the middle of having signed something on chain and then wait until something's been filed. So we are kind of limited to entities that can be spun up contractually, which is the case with the Swiss Association. There may be a trust product. So we're still looking at what extra product we're going to be adding. And then on the technology side, look, this has been a difficult one. We have some people who would love to see this already on layer 2. We decided that we first got to build some extra stuff, and then towards the end of the year, put OtoCo on layer 2. We're going to keep, the execution layer and the consensus layer. So we're going to keep layer 1 and layer 2, but we will definitely add a layer 2 solution to OtoCo. Go to market. Look, I don't think I need to spend a lot of time, but you've seen us pretty silent. I think we haven't really done all that much outreach. We've got a nice group in Telegram that follow us, that like what we're doing, but now we're going to be actively working on some partnerships. We did a great cooperation with Gnosis Safe, where it was announced in the last newsletter in February, where you can now basically have a new LLC spun up with your multi-sig wallet, your Gnosis Safe multi-sig wallet, and there's going to be a couple more things happening in the partnership space. Who else is here? This is probably more of a slide with investors. However, it is important that we see players that kind of, plot coordinates along the x-axis, which is how quick and easy is it to deploy, and then on the y-axis, how legally valid is your solution. And don't get me wrong, we love things like Polka Starter, we love DAO House, we love Phantom, we love these things, but what we feel is that quickly you kind of hit the limit of where you say, is this actually working? Can this be having any legal benefits that give certainty to people who use these products? And I think there's still a lot of question marks around that. So we very much aim to be in that top right corner when it comes to speed of development or deployment, with the with the clear legal validity behind what we're doing. So there we go, guys. I think I managed to limit this to 20 minutes. And now I think we're ready to take any questions you may have. I see a lot happening here already in the chat. Michael, you want to filter out some questions here?
Yeah, so I just got a couple questions, excuse me, sent to me privately, and one of them I just answered in the chat because it's a pretty common one that we've got, and it's good for everyone to just see it in the chat, and it's good to have it just, I think, in writing, in paper form there. Mm-hmm. We did get another question regarding bank accounts and crypto exchange account openings, which I thought would be an interesting one to touch on. And I'm looking at the attendees and I'm trying to see if anybody here might have a success story, but I don't think so. I think the success stories did not, for the bank account at least, did not make it into this webinar.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the bank account.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So, and then we can talk about some of the other question I see here. The bank account, the issue we're having is that banks are having a hard time getting a mind around how an LLC can be owned by an Ethereum wallet, let's stand a multi-sig wallet, okay? And so we are trying to make the case that as long as you would be able to somehow attest that, let's say Michael is the controller of that wallet, it boils down to the same as opening a bank account of an LLC that is a sole member LLC owned by Michael. And so that's the key case we're making. And I think we're making good inroads with a number of banks, even with more traditional banks who are willing to go along in our thinking. What we are building, however, is a technology solution that will allow them to effectively have incontrovertible proof that if Michael signs something with his wallet, that we can show that that's actually Michael signing. And this sounds very kind of trivial for us in the Web3 community because, okay, if you sign with your wallet, you must be having the private keys to that wallet. For banks, that's a little bit more difficult to get their head around, but we'll get there. The rest will then just be getting an EIN for your OnChain LLC. And guess what? We've seen some people getting an EIN, an entity identification number from IRS, because that's a requirement. All banks will want to have an EIN on file when they open a bank account for an OnChain LLC. Okay. We've seen some people already using like a TransferWise. I believe it's now called Wise. I believe one user has managed to open a Revolut account for the OnChain LLC. So you can start seeing some of the fiat solutions being added on to the OnChain LLC. The bank account, give us a little bit more time. It obviously very much depends on the banks themselves, but I think we may be getting there. For instance, even Mercury.com, I don't know if anybody of you is using Mercury. It's kind of a neat neobank in that everything is driven by their app. I think Naval invested in that, so there's very much a meeting a demand from the entrepreneurial community to have a bank that feels very different from the traditional banks in the United States. I think they may be a candidate. There's Commercium, there's also Avanti in Wyoming. So there's a number of players we're talking to.
Yeah, I also want to just mention that if anybody here would like to pursue getting a bank account, we have some good relationships with these banks, as Han mentioned. If you are somebody that already has an EIN or you're comfortable getting an EIN, send me a message. I put my Telegram handle in the chat because I've already helped a couple people now, a couple OtoCo users to get a bank account with Mercury. None of them have succeeded, but also none of them have actually, the reason they've always not succeeded is because the bank has always been unhappy with like their web presence. Like the bank really wants you to have a website, for example, or to have documentation. So these are not even like legal engineering problems. They're very superficial problems that I'm working with these different users on solving. So yeah, send me a message for any of this stuff and I can help you out.
Great. Hey, there's a question here which I think we got addressed, which is what happens with the Series LLC if the mother LLC gets dissolved. It's a fair question. However, we can hopefully give all the comfort you need on that. We made sure that there is absolute ring fencing of assets and liabilities between not just the Series LLC and the master, but also between what I call the horizontal potential spillover between the series themselves. And that is just a matter of wording carefully in both the operating agreement of the series and the operating agreement of the master that there is no possible contamination. To put this a little bit in perspective, the master is really an empty shell. So yes, could it happen that the master gets dissolved? The only scenario in which the master gets dissolved is that we would not pay the annual franchise in Wyoming or in Delaware. Now, the annual franchise is a low number. It's just in the hundreds. And the only thing that we actually need to do as the master is paying that franchise tax, because that keeps us there with the registered office that all of you as users of OtoCo need to have a legally valid entity in Wyoming or Delaware. And so there's no debt being put on the master. There is no activity in the master. We literally spun these up as box standard LLCs, but with a special operating agreement to make that interplay possible with the series. And it's very difficult to imagine how that entity could ever get dissolved. Okay, so the other thing that we did very different from the traditional setup, where typically a master is actually a member of each of the series, because the use case of series LLCs really comes from the real estate world. We got to that, if you want, and we made it very clear that obviously the master is never ever a member of the series, because you do not want us to be a member of your series. You are the member of your series, or better put, your Ethereum wallet is the first member of your series, and consecutive wallets as you allow in more members. And so there too, there is really no risk of contamination between those two. There's a lot more on our Gitbook on this one, and I'm happy to share legal advice we got on that if you look for further comfort on that. But the short of it, that there's really no risk of contamination between master and series and the series individually. There's a very long question here from Robert. I see. It's a private message. OtoCo platform for our customers create DAOs. Okay. It seems like, Robert, we may have to take this one, offline. So yeah, it's a long one. I need to get my mind around this one. But I think from at the face of it, this should be possible. Tweaking the smart contracts, obviously, that would be sort of diverting a little bit of the development effort here. But Michael, can you make sure that we can reach out to Robert and follow up on this one?
Yeah, definitely. And we actually had a short discussion about this a couple of weeks ago too. I think the main like one of the main parts of this is, I think, just being able to swap the master LLC. So if in theory, could you keep the same smart contracts and replace the legal agreement, the master LLC, with a new one? Now you would have to probably build this out yourself. Like we don't support that natively in OtoCo right now, but yeah, since everything's open source, that there should be no issue with that. It's just the implementation might be difficult. Does that sound about right, Han?
Yeah, and you've got to be obviously careful that what we just talked about, right? That the wording is there that makes it very clear that there could be any possible contamination. For instance, under US jurisprudence more than law, um, remember, a series is actually being spun up contractually with the master. So you enter into a contract, and that's how we managed to get that LLC spun up by you signing on blockchain with your Ethereum wallet. We you need to be taking care when you draft an operating agreement. So let's say you ripped out the one that we gave you and you wanted to put in your own one, that you make it very clear that your Series LLC is considered a separate legal entity with its own assets and liabilities. So there's a risk that if you start fiddling with some of that wording, that it may not be recognized as its own legal container. And so that's really the risk, and that's why we would urge people to just stick to the template, which we're, by the way, we're also revising and updating in the context of our roadmap. Somebody asked about Corey, I think, asked about Cali DAO. Yeah, sure, Cali DAO. Look, we've known the team behind Cali DAO. Actually, they've been following us for a long time. We can only welcome this in the sense that it kind of shows in a way validation, and there's a number of things there that we learn from. There's a number of things I like to think that they learned from us. There may be even a convergence of some of our efforts here. Yes, I know, Corey, that you did it on Arbitrum or on Matic with Cali DAO. We kind of, as I mentioned, right on our roadmap, we pushed this out a little bit further in the year to also go on layer 2. It's just that when we polled our users, they didn't seem to be all that sensitive that there were gas fees related to spinning up an actual legal entity, knowing that if you were to do it in an analog way, you would be paying, probably $200 something for the actual activation and another 200 something for the annuals. So even if the gas fees have occasionally been $40-50 in addition to what we charge, it didn't seem like that was the major blocker. But hey, it's an experiment. So we will see once we put in a Matic or an Arbitrum, whether that's indeed going to totally sort of power law our adoption. There's also some limitations, however, on some of these layer 2s in terms of what you can do from a technical and smart contract point of view. And so we probably got to hold off a little bit longer on getting this on layer 2. In the meantime, we're talking to Cali DAO. We obviously know Legstyle. We welcome Legstyle in similar place because it goes into open sourcing legal templates, which I think is the future. I think legal firms will no longer be able to get away with charging for basically a print screen effort, because that's what it is when you recycle a template. Maybe we will still pay lawyers for brain trust, but not for a generation of documents. I think that's out of the window. And in that respect, there's a lot of templates there in Legstyle, not just related to an LLC, that all of you may want to check out and use, from NDAs to, C Corp material and so on and so on. So we're personally very happy here that this is happening and that we see other people joining the space.
All right, I see that Han seems to have disconnected. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. My voice is still gone because it's so early in the morning over here. Oh, he's back already. Okay, well, never mind.
Sorry, that was my fat.
I was getting ready to step in and continue the questions, but that was like 2 seconds, so I don't think that'll be any problem.
Total fat finger, my fault.
Oh, you clicked it. That's kind of funny. Okay.
Yeah. No, but thanks for asking, Corey. We're not shying away from, look, it's an open source community. Are we thinking about Cali DAO? Are we thinking about Aragon? Although Aragon, it kind of seems to have stalled a little bit in their speed of doing things. We're trying to figure out there. We have had discussions with them, but it's an open source community. So I think in the end, the collaboration here will really pay off rather than trying to build, paywalls. That's very much the Web 2 approach. I got a question here from Eduardo in the Q&A only. Last calls, Hans stated that it's feasible to issue tokens associated with creative works, music, on exchange, share on future successors or royalty distributors. How is this not an STO since it's not associated with the company and its earnings equity evaluation? Is there such a use case already underway using OtoCo? Yeah, Eduardo. So yes. So the way our overall philosophy with OtoCo is that this is a toolbox for the community, and the community is pretty resourceful, right? And we didn't feel like it was up for us to dictate in any way or narrow the options they had when they are using or attaching a token to their LLC. So there's two ways of doing this. If you go into OtoCo, you go into the dash. I don't know, Michael, if you got one open there on Robston, there is a possibility for you to issue ERC20 tokens. We will add some more standards there, but an ERC20 token that is effectively being issued by your LLC. However, it's up to you to define the contents of that token. Obviously, if it's an NFT, it would be an ERC20, but I guess the point is that we leave it to the user to say, okay, I feel there is a need to issue a token out of my LLC, and this is what I perceive as the nature of my token. In the case of music rights, anime, as you mentioned here, Eduardo, we know that in the current legal analysis, these products of the creative mind are not considered securities, okay? And as a result, you wouldn't have any restrictions on the securities laws in terms of how these could be issued from an LLC, or how these could be issued generally, even if you were not to use an LLC. And we have a possibility within our dash to basically paste a smart contract address and attach the token that you may have issued already to your LLC. So the LLC becomes kind of the legal shield under which you've issued the token. It becomes a bit trickier. I don't want to go into too much detail about music and so on. It becomes a bit trickier if you start selling streaming rights, which is, by the way, a use case I'm personally very excited about. Instead of buying, let's say, a single, one song as an NFT, you can say, well, what's the value if I can basically stream as many songs as I want using Spotify? The more interesting use case in music, in my mind, is streaming rights, where you would be able to buy streaming rights to a song, and then at the smart contract level, you would be able to receive a certain portion of every event where somebody has listened to the song, and the rest obviously goes back to the creator. However, there, I think on the securities laws analysis, you're treading a finer line whether that could be perceived as some sort of security, because you are effectively receiving some investment type rights or investor type rights. Does that make sense? Anybody who wants to speak? Jesus is here.
So, Han, I discovered that since we have a 2-speaker limit, somebody can come up to speak, but I will need to leave so they can take my spot, because for some reason, Webinar Jam considers even a guest to be like one of the speakers. Yeah, it's a bit frustrating.
Okay, sure. Maybe we are being cautious here, and you empty the seat, Michael, and we let somebody else speak who wants to speak. But obviously, you still be here as a guest. Then that's okay. I'll manage to get some of these questions. I see Corey's also asking about UAE Free Zone. Can we take that? This is indeed a little bit more of an autonomous question. We're not big fans, by the way, of the UAE. We feel it's very expensive to set up a company if you actually take into account the annual renewal, that business license that you need to get. We feel it's probably justified if you think about moving there. And so no surprises, some of our Russian clients who are looking into this right now, but to actually operate out of the UAE, unless you have geographical reasons to be there, we don't know if that's now the first jurisdiction that we should be looking at, even on the autonomous side. Okay. We also know there's a lot of friction, a lot of running around with a bundle of paper from government office to government office in Dubai, for instance, to get an entity set up. So I think we're not gonna touch it. I want to go back to Jesus. We are going to set up a DAO, so the management will be distributed among the members and the management. Just we need a new operating agreement. Okay, I think we kind of talked about this, right? New operating agreement, open law, NFTs. It's a long one, Jesus. There's a lot of detail there. Maybe this one too, we should just trash out over a Telegram, if that's okay. But yes, it seems like it comes down to, again, to some sort of replacement of the operating agreement. Remember that generally the templates that we give, just like everybody else, open law as well, by the way, are on an as-is basis. Okay, so we kind of go like, hey, here's the template, run with it if you want, but it's obviously at your own risk when you make any of these changes that you have in mind. So if you are going to make changes, I assume that you're going to be using counsel or have counsel review those to make sure it kind of all works. Are we going to add more iterations, for instance, multi-member LLCs? We even are now looking to insert a club LLC, so basically wrapping an LLC around what could be an investment club. There's a couple of restrictions that need to be put in there to make sure that it remains a club, but it's not being seen as a fund. This is something that we're looking closely at what Syndicate is doing. So again, these operating agreement, these templates will give you, feel free to use them on an assets basis. If you change them, however, just make sure that you know what you're doing, essentially. Okay, Jesus, you're going to share that with us. That's great. I appreciate that. Okay. Yes, thanks include short films or animation, even memes with buying music streaming rights. Yes, fair enough. What else
We
is
have
out
a kind
there?
of a fun question from Chuck. Do you want to take a fun one?
Yeah, sure.
If a genie showed up to grant wishes, like a genie from a bottle,
yeah,
what wish would you have? Or I guess, yeah, what would you wish for?
you
In
mean,
regards to OtoCo, I think specifically, not maybe, yeah, not just in your personal life or like a bigger house or something.
Oh yeah, no, bigger house. I don't need a bigger house. It's a good one. I guess it's to me, right? I don't see that question, by the way. Is that in the Q&A or in the chat?
Yeah, it's in the Q&A section. You have to scroll down because the questions kind of stack up and some of the questions get buried at the bottom.
Sure, yeah. Sure. Look, OtoCo has been kind of a fun ride in a sense that we felt a little bit misunderstood for a while. And that's also why we welcome like a Cali DAO and some other initiatives here. I think it's kind of resurfacing that this may well be one of the primitives of the decentralized space. However, it just happens to be less sexy. And that's fine. We know we can live with less sexy. It doesn't all have to be AMMs and decentralized exchanges, which also seem to be almost like from yesterday, because now it's all NFT. So my wish is kind of that this would percolate to become indeed recognized as one of the primitives of the decentralized space. We need a new form of organization that can capture the human creativity and the tremendous entrepreneurial energy that we see coming from this space. And guys, I was there at the .com, I was still a banker at the time for all my sins. And when you thought that at that time there was a lot of energy flowing into .com, nothing compared to what we're seeing right now. We all should be so privileged that we see this happen right in front of our eyes. How many generations have been part of such a dramatic revolution in things, a new type of technology that will change everything? I think the last generation may have been Steve Jobs's and Bill Gates's generation when the microprocessor and the PC broke through. But we are also privileged to see this happen right in front of our eyes. But there's so much to be built still. And yeah, we kind of feel like, because we learn so much from Autonomous, we learn so much from our clients, that we may well be around engineering and tinkering with that new vehicle for human ingenuity. Let's call it that. Sounds a bit bombastic, guys. Sorry, but you asked me what do I wish for. That's really what I wish for. Digital asset pledges. Yes, well, digital asset pledges, Corey. great that you're excited about that. We're excited about it as well, because we feel that too many people in the space are still doing stuff from their own wallet, kind of in personal name. They don't have any legal protections around it. And so it's a bit like unprotected sex, I guess, right? You've got to be careful out there, because you're doing stuff, you're pushing code, and ultimately, if you do this all in personal name, it could backfire, and it could eventually, become a liability in your personal name. And so we really make a case, I think, that for everything one does, even if it's holding a crypto wallet, it probably makes sense to do this in the name of a quick entity that you spun up. Not even a DAO, but probably like an OnChain LLC. Now, what you then have to do to make this possible, and you need to also have a mechanism where people can say, look, this wallet, that's actually not my wallet. So even if it gets to IRS for some of our US users, you should be able to provide proof that this wallet is not containing assets that personally belong to you, but that actually belong to a legal entity that you control. And that's why we're making this asset pledge. It's essentially borrowing from some language and some legal techniques that we see happen, for instance, in the trust space. When you settle a trust, you're the settler of a trust. At some point after the trust has been settled, or coinciding with the settling of the trust, you will be pledging your assets in kind of an analog setup, right? Where you say, okay, I now have a trust. I will now put some company shares in there. I will put, property in there. I will put other assets in there. And that's kind of the legal technique that we are applying. Okay. Okay. Is there anything else here? Digital?
Yeah, there's lots of questions in the Q&A only section. I'm just going to pull another one.
Seems like
question
I don't have
earlier
a working scroll bar in my Q&A. Let me make sure.
Oh, are you serious? Oh, that might be why. Okay.
That may be why.
We have a question.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So just a question from Eric. Interested in hearing a little bit more about the dApp store specifically. Sure. Are they going to be full stack dApps, or are we thinking it's going to be more like smart contracts and protocols that are kind of in integration or an added feature, as opposed to like a brand new app within OtoCo?
No, it's going to be probably more bolt-on. The analogy but it's a very unhappy analogy, is probably a WordPress. Don't shoot me for it, but we probably all done a WordPress site, and we felt it was easy to spin it up and then add some plugins, as they're called, I believe, in WordPress. So think about it more as dApp plugins, where we give you the motherboard and you can start adding stuff. Somebody else was actually making perhaps a better analogy. It was comparing us to Michael, help me out here, the Canadian e-commerce software provider.
Shopify.
Shopify, where they make it so easy for you to start an e-commerce store, and then they give you all sort of plugins. We don't really see the need for a full stack dApp store in there. The idea is, for instance, let me give an example of a C Corp. The C Corp does remain the gold standard for any entrepreneurial effort where you're gonna be attracting equity investors. Okay, and especially in the context of NFTs, we actually see that these C Corps are suddenly starting to lead a second life, if you want, where lots of Web2 obviously are C Corps, but now we see some Web3 companies on the operational level becoming C Corps again, because they have revenue. And if you do an NFT drop, you basically selling a product and you get revenue from it. So this is interesting for equity type investors. Okay, now with a C Corp, typically you will build a team around you. You will have an employee share option scheme. Okay, so imagine that in the next iteration of OtoCo, we've got the C Corp in there. We figured out how we can make the incorporation super quick, super cheap, and you want to add an ESOP, employee share option program, to your ESOP to remunerate your staff. Okay, well, an analog, Eric, you know this, an analog ESOP is probably a 60-pager. A coded ESOP is 11 lines of code in Solidity, because an employee option scheme is literally a timeline that says, okay, Michael's been around for a year, so his first vesting of 25% of his overall allocation kicks in. And Michael would then literally see after that 1 year cliff, if we do this under Bay Area Silicon Valley standards, that 25% of the shares of that C Corp would trickle into his wallet, assuming that the shares will be tokenized, which they will. And then every month after that, for another 3 years, Michael will see that 1/36th of his over allocation will literally trickle into his wallet. And the smart contract, 11 lines of code, we've done it, will basically govern what is now a 60-page employee share option agreement. I think that's a good example of how we can mature in this space and start really seeing some of that analog business logic transposed into smart contracts. So that's the kind of thing that we hope will be offered in the dApp store. We may be doing the ESOP, but there may be 3-4 competitive products, just like in Shopify or in WordPress, where other people have been working on an ESOP plugin and made it work. I can talk a lot more about that, but that's kind of what I have in mind for that dApp store. Okay. Michael, you want to throw me some more? We still got a little bit of time. Mm-hmm. And somehow I can't quite scroll down on the Q&A. I'm not quite sure what's happening here.
Yeah, no problem at all. I would say good one. Oh, sorry. This one's, I'm seeing a couple messages got posted twice. We just got a question actually in the main chat from Corey about, well, actually, you might want to read it for yourself, but he says, since spinning up these entities is so instant and costs relatively very little, what kind of legal protection do they actually afford?
Oh, do you get the same legal protection? So it's not because you manage to compress the time it takes to activate a company and maintain it that your protection would be any less. Maybe an analogy is are the way we now buy airline tickets and get our boarding pass issued. There used to be a time where first you had to go into a travel agent, and then you typically sat down with some friendly 65-year-old lady who would be at some point handwrite your ticket, oh, yay, we're going to Paris. And that was the way we traveled, in the 70s, in the 80s, even still in the 90s, until an Expedia came along and some of the other travel aggregators. And now we're basically buying our tickets directly from one of those or from the airline website directly. And then guess what? We even get the boarding pass sent to our wallet on a phone and we scan it. And so nothing has, in this whole process, nothing has changed the validity of the boarding pass and the ticket, but it's all become a lot more compressed and a lot more digital and online. And so that's essentially where we think company incorporation is gonna go. It has to go that way because I think people will increasingly recognize that if you make it easy for people to spin up and activate legal wrappers, that you're going to be attracting a tremendous amount of entrepreneurial talent and activity. Okay.
Well said. Yeah. There's a question here that from Eduardo, and I did say, Eduardo, I messaged you that you should send me a message privately on Telegram. I still would like you to do that just because this is kind of the more experimental side of OtoCo, but I think it's still interesting to speak on since it has to do with our crypto pledge feature. And so the question is about making the connection between OnChain LLC and traditional entities or tokenizing various agreements. And the one thing I wanted to mention about that is, as part of our crypto pledge, that feature, we have a way now to link analog documents to your entity address on chain. So you can actually take a paper document, or sorry, it would be a PDF. So take a PDF document and create a link that's visible on the Ethereum blockchain. And this is kind of a way to, I don't know if tokenize is the right word, but blockchainify these documents. And anyway, the reason I'm hesitant to go into too much detail is because it is very experimental right now. We need to speak to counsel a little bit on this, but I would love to show it to you, get your feedback on the user experience. I've spoken to a few other people regarding it, and it does work, and it is at least very cool. So yeah, send me a message.
Sure. Hey, before we go, guys, because we have 5 minutes left, I want to hopefully talk a little bit about something I'm personally super excited about in the context of OtoCo, which is a concept we're going to be introducing that has been labeled already, I guess, as governance mining. So mining for governance purposes versus liquidity mining in how we plan to structure our governance going forward. So here's the friction that I see. We see that a tremendous amount of money is being staked in protocols for liquidity mining. However, liquidity mining, we feel, is basically a very short-term, instant reward, instant gratification mechanism where people obviously will get paid in native token of, for instance, an automated market maker in order to basically provide services to the protocol. However, it doesn't create any loyalty. It is a pure instant gratification scheme. How do we replicate in DeFi or in Web3 generally, away from just OtoCo? How do we replicate the sort of sustained effort that we all know, if we look in our heart, we all know is required to basically keep a project on the rails for the long term through thick and thin, with all of the setbacks that it can have? How can we make sure that developers who are always tempted to get involved with the next exciting project stay the course and help out for the longer term? Our answer to that is governance mining. And that basically means that you link the issuance of your token to real sustained efforts by token holders to be involved with your project through, for instance, repetitive participation in on-chain voting at the DAO level, and also that the actual contributors to your project, who could be based anywhere, it doesn't have to be an identifiable team, are actually rewarded to participate in the governance and the major roadmap for your project. So we will be coming out, I think, coinciding with the closing of our pre-order window, the second half of March, with what I think are really some very interesting ideas and rather novel, related to how all of you as token holders will be able to benefit and receive more OtoCo tokens if indeed we feel that there is, and it gets a little bit, and that's where we're spending most of our time, there is a human judgment factor which makes this trickier than liquidity mining, but we feel we cracked it. And look out for a communication towards the end of March to share a little bit more ideas about how we're going to governance mine our tokens. And so basically we're talking here about that last 25% that flows back to the foundation. If you look at the slide here, 25% goes back to the OtoCo DAO, as we call it. That 25% of tokens is really what we want to use to governance mine. And I see Jesus seems to already be clued up on governance mining, find it very interesting. And so this is definitely something that we want to use to radically change the way we're going to govern altogether. We're going to govern the OtoCo project. The final thing I want to say last minute is do stake. You know, if you think that we're going to be doing and sticking to it, and we're going to be one of the players in this space, it would give me tremendous pleasure if indeed we can see you contribute. We kept the initial contribution very low, $200 equivalent in DAI or USDT. You can go to the launch pool site on our main website, just, you know, pre-order token. It'll be great if we see us comfortably exceeding the 1 million that we currently have on the board. Lots more questions here, Michael, so we should make sure that we capture those and then we reach out to everybody here. And otherwise, just join our OtoCo Telegram group. Just post your questions there, and we'll do our very best to answer them.
Yeah, I'm making some notes here on who to follow up with. Anyone whose Telegram handle I have, I will chase you down.
Sounds scary, Michael. Chase you down.
It is scary.
Thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate you joining at an early time, depending on where you are, or a very late time. And we'll keep communicating and building from our side.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks very much. Take care. Thanks, Jesus.